So it's not just a book. There's so much to it, and it seems like the book that just keeps going.
I love that you say that because that's what I wanted. That was, like I said, this was inspired because I thought, like, what if you could reread like your favorite book and get more out of it? And so that's what inspired this. And so, yes.
Welcome to the Phase 4 podcast, inspired by Vishen Lakiani and Ajit Nawalkar, co-founders of EverCoach, a division of Vine Valley. In this podcast, we speak to coaches and creatives about where they were, where they are, and where they are going. This is the intersection of what we focus on expands, and your story is your superpower. My guest today is Shannon Waite. She is an award-winning writer and an educator, and she breaks down societal norms, and she writes transgressive fiction and an interactive novel that we're going to discuss today. Shannon, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, me too. I always kind of just begin with tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming an author?
So I teach high school English, which I do because I'm a reader and a writer. And so I guess I've just always been interested in that. And the way that I sort of ended up where I am now with my publications was I started with some short stories probably 10, 12 years ago, getting them published in literary magazines. A couple of years ago, I decided to go back to school for fun and get a third degree in creative writing. Finished that up this year. And while I was really focusing on my writing during that, I just kind of got this idea for the book that released last month and ran with it. And so that got published. And yeah, it's just kind of, it's my passion. I know that that's something that you know, are interested in is the purpose, play, and passion. And writing has always been that for me. I love planning things. I love creating things. Most of my hobbies are creating. My job is creating. I love curriculum because I like to plan that. And so writing just sort of follows along with that and storytelling. And that's what I devote my time to and what I find joy in.
That's awesome. It's always good when you can like use your own craft and make it your like work as well as just like a hobby on the side. And I think it's awesome what you're doing. Your book's really interesting. So I'm going to make an admission here. I didn't know what transgressive fiction was. So maybe can you just lay it out for whoever doesn't know and tell us a little about your book?
Absolutely. So transgressive fiction is kind of a subgenre. It's not a well-known genre, but it's sort of made a name for itself. And the idea behind transgression, right, is this idea that you go against societal norms. And so transgressive fiction uh, can be defined as books that really explore those societal norms and write about the things that people don't normally want to talk about or consider taboo. And they really focus on that and kind of expose the problems with those things. And so I like to write a lot of stories that look at the things in society that we consider bad or don't want to talk about. And I like writing those because I think those are actually really relatable to a lot of people and very interesting. I mean, you see people that are very interested in, you know, true crime and things like that, right? And so the book that I released is called Raising Women, and it's got a couple of genres that it fits into, but it's also actually an interactive novel, which is best known by the brand Choose Your Own Adventure. And so you get to the end of a section and you're given choices, and depending on the choice you make, changes the story that you read. There's 24 possible stories to read in my book. And typically that choose your own adventure is written for children. That brand is written for children. And so a couple of years ago, I was thinking about my favorite books by my favorite authors and how cool it would be to get to reread them, but in different ways. I mean, you can always reread a book, but what about getting to reread the same one, but differently? And so it made me think of that interactive nature, and it's very rare to find like literary fiction or fiction for adults written in that style. And so I thought about how that could be an interesting avenue to take with my writing. Sat on this idea for a while, and then probably about a year ago, just kind of like the idea came to me for what I wanted to write for that, which ended up being Raising Women. And so in this book, you meet this ex-convict named Roman, who she's a woman herself. You are actually 16, and she introduces you to these questionable choices, options of things that you end up being faced with, and you have to decide what you're going to do. And it explores this mess that is growing up girl in America or in the Midwest, and how complicated that is. And so there's a lot of things that happen in this book that are, messy and not pretty. And I had a male reader who had said that it was actually very eye-opening for him because he didn't realize that this is, girlhood. And I mean, it's not girlhood for everyone. Obviously, many people experience different things, but one of the best compliments I can receive from readers is when they tell me, I knew that girl, or like, I was that girl, or like, that happened to me, because that's what this book is supposed to be.
Yeah, for sure. There's a part of Roman in me in my past lives that I don't want to go back to, but I
Love that.
wonder one thing, right? So like it's a young girl and then she's like kind of getting introduced to all this stuff, right? And it's set like now, but that could be any time almost, right? You could do that from the 1960s as a 16-year-old girl going in, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
So this actually is set in the like early 2000s. Uh I mean, which is only really noticeable based on music selections that get brought up, and the fact that there's very little to no technology in it that gets used. I really like not incorporating technology into my storytelling because, like you said, it can kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Transcend like time or timeless, and yeah,
Yeah, agree. You wouldn't want to use BlackBerry, right? Like
yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay.
And I guess the characters, like so okay, for anyone who's listening, there's four different endings, right? So depending what happens as you're reading, there'll be a paragraph like if you want to do this, go here. If you want to do this, go here. And so you could literally reread this book over and over again hundreds of times and it could be different every time.
Yeah, so there's 24 possible pathways with four unique endings. And so when you reread it, you learn new secrets about the characters. You get introduced to new characters that weren't in other pathways. Yeah, there's different ways to reread it, and you get to learn new things each time you do.
Wow. I want to definitely come back to the book. I want to know the writing part. Like, how do you keep that organized? Like, because you got to have like when you're writing a book, you're living the book, right? You're thinking about it during your day, on your way home, whatever. You're always thinking, oh, if I put this character, but how do you keep that all organized without getting it so crossed up?
Yeah, so that was a thing. It's funny because this actually worked really well with my writing style. Like I said, for years I was primarily writing short fiction. And so this style sort of allowed me to write short pieces that connected to each other, because you're not writing this one complete story. I had to be writing these different parts that could work in different stories. And so I liked that. But yes, required a lot of organization for it. So I had a map where I wrote out what, like, couple of sentences that just kind of summarized what the scene would be about. And so I had, my first scene that everyone starts off with, and then it has three choices at the end of it that you can pick from. So I wrote down what those three things would be. And then there's two ways that you could do an interactive novel where it's more linear, kind of like a family tree where, you got this and then it goes down and like choices from there go down and choices from there go down. Or you could do it the way I did it, which is where you get the choice and they go down. And then I had a choice over here, but I also wanted this to be an option over here. So, like, this and this both skip to this page. And then there's this choice over here that three things could skip to. And then you could end up down here, but then it jumps back to something over here. And so uh, I, I made it challenging even more so in that. But yeah, so I had to write all these things out, have little lines drawn and arrows drawn. And when I was typing, because you can't have designated pages yet to skip to, because obviously as you're editing, whatever was on page 18 last week could be page 22 this week. So when I say skip to page 18, that's now irrelevant. So I had to like label sections. So I had, section 1 and then 2A, 2B, 2C, 3A, 3B. And so I put placeholders, skip to these sections. And then eventually when that was completely done, I was able to change those to page numbers. But it was a lot of planning. And I'm a very indecisive person. So I was like, this is great. I don't have to pick one story and one ending I have to stick to. And then you get to the endings and you're like, now I have 4 endings to write. That's hard. But after doing a ton of work on the endings and a ton of revision, I'm very happy with the endings. And so it was well worth it. But yeah, it was a lot of plotting things out ahead of time and writing notes down. And when I finished a section, I highlighted it on my little map so that I knew that that section was done. I started working on another section. I had to label them. So it was a lot of work, but it worked really well with just the way that I write and like how I work with my writing. So despite it being a lot of work, I had a lot of fun with it. And it's the most me thing I've ever written.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a lot, right? Because you're going back and forth over there. I wonder, like, what do you hope that women, maybe younger women, would take away from this as far as like going up against this, like at least questioning societal norms?
Yeah, so my actual intended audience are women my age, like millennial women who are really interested in messy girl, unhinged women stories. Uh, because for me, the idea was this was almost like something to commiserate with. Like I said, one of the biggest compliments that I can receive from readers is when they tell me that, like, they recognized these girls or they were these girls. And so for me, it was I wanted, I guess, women to be seen in it and understand it. And then obviously other people can read it. I've had men read it, younger girls can read it. I was reading weird stuff when I was in high school. But I think, yeah, my biggest intention was sort of this understanding and feeling seen and heard. And then I guess from that, like, sub understandings that I'd like for people to take away is just sort of, yeah, the challenges that girls face growing up and how many contradictions and expectations there are and what kind of mixed signals that gives to girls while they're trying to create this identity for themselves.
Yeah, I have a daughter and she's 8, and I see the old grandmas and aunts trying to be helpful, but I'm like, oh my God, stop saying that. Like, um, I guess like so I've never heard of that genre, but is there authors that inspired you, or like how did you land on that compared to just normal fiction or anything else?
So, one of the really well known authors that gets labeled as transgressive fiction is Chuck Palahniuk. He wrote Fight Club and a ton of other things, but his best known is Fight Club. And he is definitely one of my inspirations uh, in my writing in general. Um, so I'm trying to think other writers that inspired this book specifically, Elizabeth Ellen. She's a female author who writes very gritty things that aren't always considered socially acceptable. And Sela Saderstrom also was an author that inspired this piece, just her writing style in her book, The Meat and Spirit Plan. So there are quite a few authors that write this kind of stuff, or just, like I said, stuff that challenges social norms in general. There's a lot of men authors and a growing number of like women authors also. And yeah, that's the kind of stuff I read, and that's the kind of stuff that inspires my writing, definitely.
That's great. This is my work. I'm a life coach, and this is what we're doing all the time is like, why do you think that? Why do you believe that? When did, like, is it true? Is that someone else's belief? Are you carrying this for 20 years and it's not even yours? Let go of it. Um, so I definitely like that. How about as like, now you're a writing teacher as well, right? And so
Yes.
doing this must like help you expand so much. Where what we focus on expands. And so how does that help you, not even just yourself, but going forward now with your students and stuff?
I mean, you're asking how does me being a writer like impact me as a teacher? Or
Just this book, like going through that experience, because it is very different. And like you had to come up with an ending and then be like, no, we're going to do this. But just like having not accomplished that, it is accomplishment, but just having done that, having that come out of you and now it's there. How does it help you just as a person evolve, but also it's going to help your students and everyone you touch for sure.
yeah, I think a couple of ways. So one way is by going through these types of processes, it reminds me what it's like to, put in that work or to have something new you're learning. Same thing when I studied jujitsu, and jujitsu, I'm learning these new things that are very new to me, and that is a very humbling experience for me. And it reminds me, I teach this stuff, but I teach this stuff because I know it. And when you're put in a position where you're learning something you don't know, it reminds you what it's like to not know something, and it reminds me what it's like for my students who don't understand how to write this type of paragraph or do this type of grammatical sentence. And so same thing with writing this book. When you're put in a position where you're learning things and you're experimenting with things, it really helps like humble me and remind me what, kinds of experiences my students are having. And then also on top of that, just by being a writer, it influences how I'm able to talk about literature with my students and the books that we're reading in class, and sort of help guide my students into understanding those better and understanding the themes of them.
Yeah. And hopefully encourage them to go out and try to jump into their fears if they haven't.
Yeah.
And so it does go back to the book now, but it does challenge societal norms and narratives. And so how exactly does it do that? Or can you give us one example? Or
I'll give you a little bit. I don't want to give too much away, but so Roman, like I said, is this ex-convict. She's 21 or 22. You don't really know, but she's in her early 20s, and she's this unapologetic woman. Like she just says and does the things she wants. And I feel like many people have had experiences with this type of woman or this type of person in their life. It's someone who's very, very charismatic and captivating, despite knowing that like they're not always the best influence. And so she's almost alluring, and like you enjoy her, even though you see these things that she's doing and how that could be damaging for you in this book. And I say you because it's written in second person point of view. You're put in this character's shoes. So And she, well, she gives you these challenges. You're faced with beginning to, learn about like yourself and others. And one of the possible choices, I'll list some of the choices that you could possibly make. There's the possibility of tasting Roman's blood. There's the possibility of branding yourself with a very hot screwdriver. That's something that she invites you to do at one point. Dating a married man, despite the fact that you're 16, you end up, you could end up at a party where this married man shows some interest in you. And so these are all some of the challenges that are presented, or not challenges, the choices that are presented to you under Roman's influence. And so, yeah, it just kind of allows you to explore like what you're interested in and think about why you're interested in that and whose influence is it that's influence like making you want to do that thing. And then on top of it, the other thing that I really enjoy about this story being told in this interactive format is that you're given these choices and you're making the choices, but are they your choices? I mean, you only had two options, right? So are these even your choices at all? Like, who's giving you these choices? And are these you, or are these society or somebody else? And um, so I think that I love this story being in the interactive format for the way that the interactive format like really adds to the thematic element.
Yeah, that's a good one. Is there like do you must get feedback? Is there like a common like we all went down this way or is it spread out? Do you know any? Do you have any feedback of readers?
That's the interesting thing is when someone says, "Oh, I really like the story," or "I read your story." I'm like, "Okay, but can I ask you what you read? Because I don't even know. Like you're all reading different things, so I don't even have any idea what you read when you tell me you read it," which is really interesting. And I feel weird being like, "Can you tell me what you read?" Am I being annoying by asking that? But like, I don't even know what people read when they tell me they've read my book because you could have read many different things or one of many different things. So it varies, it seems, because sometimes they'll tell me like what ending they landed on, which even then there's four endings but 24 different ways to get to these endings, so I still don't have any idea what happened in between for you to get to that. But yeah, the people will end on different things, and so they seem to make all sorts of choices, which is interesting to think about. Everybody makes different choices in this book too.
That's awesome. It's like the whole theme of it, right? Societal norms, making choices. Are they our choices or not? That's good. Um, I think I ask everyone this. This is Phase 4 podcast, and Phase 4 in the sixth phase meditation by Vishen Lakhiani is all about creating a future 3 years from now. So where's Shannon 3 years from today?
So in 3 years, I picture myself teaching where I am now, continuing to write. I imagine myself having at least 2 to 3 more books at that point. I actually this summer I'm releasing a collection of short stories that the stories are all going to be about the woman and raising women. So think of it as an expansion pack, like expansion packs for games. I don't know if you grew up with like The Sims or Roller Coaster Tycoon like I did, where, you could get these expansion packs that now you could have date night in The Sims or the pet shop in The Sims. And so this is like, you know, you get these short stories. They're going to be both prequels and sequels to these characters. So you get to learn more about them before raising women and after raising women. So that's going to be releasing this summer. I've already got my next interactive novel plot brewing. I've got like ideas written down. Have not mapped it out yet because I got to get finished with this story collection first. But I plan on having another one of those and then possibly another expansion pack for that. But so yes, in 3 years I plan on having a few more books. And then I Like I said, I got this creative writing degree. It was my third degree because I'm a nerd and I really like school. And so if I picture myself in 3 years, I picture myself in school. We'd have to see financially if it makes sense for me to just go back to school for fun again at that point. But, if I'm dreaming, just having school for fun is always, in the back of my head.
I think it's important, right, to follow your passions and then you can figure more out from that. So I
Absolutely.
that collection you're talking about, is that an excerpt at the back of the Raising Woman or is that something else?
Yeah. So at the end of Raising Woman, there's one of the short stories. Some of the stories are very short flash fiction pieces, which is the piece you're talking about. And then some of the stories will be longer short fiction. But there'll be over 30 stories that, yeah, explore all of the women in Raising Women. And so at the back of Raising Woman, there's one story about Roman that will be in the collection of short stories. So yeah, I'm glad you noticed that.
Yeah, it's pretty racy. Um,
Yes.
I think, and something else cool about it, you have like games in your book, and you can. We're gonna leave the links, but when you order, you can get stickers and everything, right? So it's not just a book. There's so much to it, and it seems like the book that just keeps going.
I love that you say that because that's what I wanted. That was, like I said, this was inspired because I thought, like, what if you could reread like your favorite book and get more out of it? And so that's what inspired this. And so, yes, I wanted it to be very interactive, very much so. It just keeps going. I had a reader a few days ago leave a review saying that it's not even about like which ending is the better ending, but it's a matter of like those what if moments, right? When you're like, what if I did this other thing in my life? And she said, go back to page 38 and find out. And so that's exactly what you get to do is just keep going back.
That's cool. So like shock value and then meaningful storytelling. Are you thinking about this as you're writing it, or just like, no, I'll just write it?
Yes, yes and no. So I mean that's really what transgressive fiction is, although uh you'll never want to do shock value just for shock value's sake, right? It's a matter of like, this has to have a purpose. Like, it's shocking, but like, what are you saying about that? Not just making it shocking just to make it shocking. And so, um, I like, I like incorporating those shocking elements, but I incorporate them because there's something that I want to say to readers about those things. And so that's typically just those are the stories that I like telling and the things I like writing and the things that I think about and the things that I read and uh, just how my weird mind works. And so that's what I like turning into stories are these things that either surprise you or don't surprise you, but don't normally get talked about or written about and in a way that, is interesting and says something meaningful.
Very good answer. I think as we begin to wind down, if this episode resonates with you, please like, subscribe, share, and reach out to Shannon. We'll leave all of her information about raising women and maybe even her next book in the show notes. And Shannon, before I ask my last question, I kind of just let the guests take it wherever they want. So where if you have something to sell, sell it. If you're teaching a course, if you want to talk about writing, whatever you want, travel, whatever, take it away.
Yeah. So like I said, Raising Woman is the most me thing I've ever written. It, the reason I want it to feel like women that readers know is because these are the girls I grew up with. Like, these are things inspired by my experiences, inspired by the experiences of the girls I went to high school with or were best friends with. And when I wrote it, between what I was writing about, the way I was writing it, the way I was able to have fun with it just felt very me and was just um it's a passion project and I'm very passionate about it, but it's been such an honor to have other people read it and enjoy it and reread it and get to experience just this writing I was able to do. And yeah, like I said, I've been a writer my whole life. I love writing. I'm passionate about it. I I was in a car accident in 2011, a fatal car accident, and I didn't write for a few years. And when I started reading and writing for fun again, I realized how much of myself I had lost when I wasn't writing. And so it just sort of, again, with, your purpose, play, and passion that you like to talk about, I realized that that's what that is for me, and which is why made it intentional to go back to school for writing. I didn't need to, but I wanted to be very intentional about this thing that's important to me and that, gives me joy and gives me purpose and that I'm passionate about. And so I do think those things are very important for people, whatever those things are. And, I hope that through storytelling, people can, find like purpose, play, and passion. And that's just, yeah.
Yeah, there's a book called The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler, and that's what he says. If it doesn't have to be writing or anything, just
Yeah.
to find your curiosity, and you got to like almost get like a little kid. What did you like when you were younger? And then go explore that. And yeah, maybe if it's basketball, that maybe you're not be able to be in the NBA, but it doesn't mean you can't coach basketball or do something towards it, right? He has a good one. He says take 25 things that aren't related and just list 25 things you like. So like let's say outer space, writing, running, whatever. 25 random things, and then look for cross sections where they're together. And like so let's say for me writing and sports, and it's like, oh, maybe you should write about sports or something like that. And it's like a tool to help you find what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's what I think about reading. As a teacher, I hear a lot of people say, either my students or people who find out I'm a teacher, like, oh, well, that was my worst subject, or I'm not a reader, which is wrong. We're all readers. You just have to find what you like reading, and that's it. Like, it might be you're not interested in my book. You're not interested in any kind of fiction. It might be you want to read about basketball and basketball players and their lives, or you might want to read about history, or maybe you do only like fiction, but a certain genre. I am a reader, but there are a million books in the world that I don't want to read, but it doesn't make me not a reader. It's just a matter of finding, what you enjoy. And so I think there's, you just have to find those things that interest you and yeah, that cross over, and run with them because that's, what, I don't know, what makes life better. And I know time is always difficult. It's a matter of finding time to do this stuff, right? But I think it's important to make that time where you can, even if it's just a little bit, because I don't know, that's where I find passion in my life.
Yeah, it's important. I think I know I said final question, but one more is what would you say to someone who's like about to write a book, wants to write a book, but they're hesitant, they're not sure, they're worried about rejection and blah blah blah. What would you tell that?
I mean, 100% do it. I The challenging thing is for me, especially for like a full book. It's different with shorter fiction, but with a full book, planning is necessary. But then there's some people that don't plan and they do fine with it, and uh, so it's really figuring out what does work for you. But I think for me, what's been one of the most helpful things that I have encouraged writers to do is I have a document where whenever anything inspires me, whether it's the idea for a title, the idea for some sort of interesting first line, some sort of like image that I think would be interesting to write about, a plot idea, anything. I go on walks. I see all sorts of things on walks, like two little girls like in cowboy hats playing with bubbles on the sidewalk, or a man riding on his bike down the street with a rose sticking out of his backpack. Like things like that. I write these things down and I have this big document. So whenever I want to write, I'm able to just go to this document and there are things I want to write that I just haven't done yet. And so I think like this document has been a lifesaver for me, and I've been able to pull things from it either for my short fiction or for the novel. And So I really think just paying attention to the world around you, because there's so many things in it that are so interesting that like stories are being told every day that you can steal from that like people aren't. And so yeah, just noticing things, keeping notes of those things, and if planning is something that you need, absolutely planning. Like as you asked about it had to be planned to do this type of writing, but doing that gave me a focus. Like I knew what I was writing. I just had to sit down and do it. And so I think planning helps. I know some people don't feel like they need to, but um like you have a story to tell. So if someone wants to write a story and they're not sure, I think the other thing too is this is the overwhelming thing about any of the things we want to do or wish we could do is don't think of yes, think of the ending, but like, step by step, right? People are like, I want to go to the gym and I want to, be able to lift this amount of weight, or I want to be able to look like this or whatever. But it's just, you have to just do it and do it every day. And eventually that thing will come. And same thing with writing. You just have to sit down, write a paragraph today, write a couple pages tomorrow. And you do that, you do it over and over, and eventually you'll have a book. And it might not be perfect. It won't be perfect the first time you write it. I had to do a ton of revisions. Like I said, I had 24 stories in my book. So I had to find like 24 people that could read it for me and tell me if it worked together. Because like I said, I had scenes that overlap in different pathways. So I have to make sure that when you're reading this pathway, that scene doesn't say something in it that didn't actually happen in that pathway. So like I got feedback from a bunch of people, and there were a lot of things I needed to clean up. There were things that I needed to do to make it better, and it was not perfect the first time I finished it, and that's okay because it gave me opportunity to make it what it needed to be that it wasn't. And so I really think, planning so you know what you want your ending to be, but also just sort of taking it step by step and being willing to make changes as you need to um, is huge. And just know that, you have a story to tell, and it's important and powerful, and just doing the work that you need to do to get it out.
Love it. Your story is your superpower. The document I have the same document. I call it a parking lot. I don't call it that. Tucker Max called it that, but it's a parking lot. And you just, whatever ideas that you're not using, you just park them there because you can come back to them later. Elon Musk, when he wants to go to Mars, he doesn't just say, I'm going straight to Mars. He goes backward. Okay, first we need to get a rocket. We need to be able to bring the rocket back. Now we can catch the rocket with an arm, like slowly, step by step. So go low, go slow. And yeah, definitely your story is your superpower. Shannon, your story is your superpower. And my final question is, how can people reach you?
So my website is www.shannonwaite, ShannonWaite, author.com. Contact information's on there. All my social media handles, I've got Instagram and Facebook. Those are Shannon Waite Author. So @Shannon Waite Author. It's consistent everywhere, Shannon Waite Author. So shannonwaiteauthor@gmail.com. If I have an account anywhere, you can find me by Shannon Waite Author that way.
Amazing. Shannon, I'm so grateful for your time today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Loved being here. If anyone wants to talk to me, I'm always happy to talk.
Thank you.